Good morning, girls. Welcome to the subject of productions and operations management. We are to start from today's session, unit number 5, that is aggregate planning and maintenance management. Before starting this unit, I would like to revise one more time the whole sequence that we have followed to make the syllabus easy to understand and the fall of the syllabus becomes easy for you all to know, right? As far as your syllabus is concerned of POM, we have dealt with 4 units up till now. The first unit was all about the introductions to productions and operations management, where we have introduced ourselves to so many aspects related to productions, so many aspects related to operations, and then the combined term productions and operations management, and how the fundamentals or principles of management are then employed to the production area. In the second unit, we have taken up with the facility location. Facility location means once the person decides as to what he wants to produce, that means whether he wants to go for the product or he wants to go for the services, he can decide where the location of these units should be, where the site should be, and that is why we have taken up the second important unit that was related to facility location, wherein he decides the place. Right. The third unit that we have done to clear out the fall, that means once he decides what to produce, where to produce is the answer, and the answer of where to produce is facility location, and then comes up how to produce, that means facility layout, in which the method is decided, the arrangement is being made depending upon the fourth unit, that is process selection, right, wherein he decides that which type of process he should select, so that ultimately it is cost effective also, and he can produce the goods that are demanded by the customers also. So he selects from the various alternatives of process available to him. Like this, we have taken up 4 units. I repeat, first unit was related to introduction to productions and operations management. Second, that means that answers what to produce, right? Second unit answers, that was facility location, that answers where to produce, right? The third unit means how to produce, in the sense that what type of arrangement should be there, and that is what all about facility layout, right? And the fourth unit that we have just completed was all about the process selection. Mind you, as far as the format of your examination pattern is concerned, it is the weightage of 14 marks for each questions that is being asked from each unit. That means you will be attempting 5 questions worth 14 marks, that comes to 70 marks of external or university paper. So from each unit you will be having at least 14 marks question. That may be the whole 14 marks question, one or question 1, like that it may be, or it may be question 1 14 marks, or A 7 marks and the rest B will be of 7 marks. That depends upon the question paper settings, right? But in all, what we need to understand right now is that we will be having 14 marks question from each of the unit. You can refer the question papers of the previous exams so as to get the clear idea, right now what we are dealing is the 5th unit, that is the aggregate planning and maintenance management. Aggregate means sum total, planning we already know, and maintenance management, how to maintain the plant, how to maintain whatever the equipments or the installations that we have done, that is related to maintenance management, right? So this will be the chapter that will be dealing. To make this chapter simple, the chapter is let me tell you, a little technical in the beginning, right? Then as we go forward you may find easy, but there is a connectivity between whatever we are doing. So it is very important that all the video lectures you should be watching it in a proper series, one by one, so as to not to get confused at the end, that what comes under which heading, right? Now, as far as this unit is concerned, it is known as aggregate planning and maintenance management, as I told you, right? The whole unit I have divided into 3 parts to make the understanding clear. Alright, the first part is all about aggregate planning. The second part will be about the capacity planning, and the third part will be about the maintenance management. Now, in various lectures, we'll be dealing with first part, then with the second and the third consequently, right? So what is important for you all to do is keep your notes ready with you, so that you can understand that suppose if you are dealing with the first part right now, that is all about aggregate planning, then how many points or how many aspects are we going to learn, and under each aspect what will be the detailed explanation. That is what the video lecture will carry. But what you should be clear is that if a 14 marks question is asked on aggregate planning, then we may be able to answer from whatever the content that we are going to learn. So to make the whole unit easy, what I have done is I have taken up at the end also, and I have divided the whole unit into 3 different segments, so that we can see each segment individually, we can connect it with the rest, and we can make the best in the unit, right? So as far as this unit is concerned, as I told you, we are to start with aggregate planning, that I have given as the first section, under which we will be learning introduction, the definitions, importance, right, approaches, methods, and how the aggregate planning is taken up in services. Most of you all have received your text. So in the text, the content is available. The points have been explained. Somewhere the explanation may differ, because there whatever has been given, the connected portion even I have added in my lecture, so that you can have a better content of both the things together, right? Because the text is available with you, you can keep the text with you, and you can follow the series that the video lecture gives you. Mind you, whatever is in the fifth unit is going to be a lengthy one, but it's not difficult. It may be a lengthy portion, but it is not difficult, and we'll find out the connectivity of 1-2 topics in each of the video lectures that now it will be conducted, right? Now onwards, it may so happen that we may have more number of video lectures also related to this particular lecture during a week period, because in order to keep the connectivity on, I may even put up with more number of lectures rather than 2 per week, right? So you should be alert about it. Anyways, moving on to the topic, moving on to the chapter here, what we have done is we have divided it into 3 parts, right? Aggregate planning, as I told you, the content. Then we'll be going on for the capacity planning. Capacity means the ability to produce something is said to be capacity. Planning, we all know. Again, that may be divided into 2 parts, that is capacity planning. See, these bifurcations are given just for your convenience, and it is given so that we can understand things easily under each section. So they are not totally disconnected kind of topics, they are connected, but they have been bifurcated just for your convenience to understand, right? So I have divided capacity planning into 2 parts, capacity planning and capacity requirement planning, that we often call it CRP. When we come to this section, everything will be dealt in detail. The third one comes up is said to be maintenance management. Here also there are 5 topics, and I have divided it into introduction, objective, scope, importance, and types of maintenance management. Likewise, we'll be going for this unit in 3 different sections, right? So you should be clear here, and I repeat, whatever the video lectures are there, as it is, the whole syllabus has been taken in a particular series, and the parts have been given. So sections have been given, say part 1, unit number 1, part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and likewise, so that you can have the continuity. I repeat, when you are going for your revision, when you are say going for the revision of first unit, then you must be knowing that there are at least 5 parts, and each part should be clear to you, that you can relate it with your text, so that ultimately even the written content or the hard copy is before you, right? So, and wherever you have any questions, definitely you can come up and you can have the queries there. No issues about that. But each unit has been divided into different parts. So likewise also, you check down the playlist and then go with the lecture one by one, so as to get the whole unit clear before you, right? Now moving on to this chapter, it is all about aggregate planning and maintenance management. Aggregate means, the term aggregate means sum total. Sum total of what? Sum total of, here aggregate planning is such a kind of planning wherein what are we doing, that we are taking up the demand on one side and supply on the other side, and when we want to balance the generated demand or maybe the predicted demand, then at that time we make the planning of this aggregate supply that we need, aggregate say inputs that we need, and then we try to balance the demand with the amount of supply that we have. And that operating activity, wherein we plan out this kind of operating activity for a particular period of time, we will see in the further points, for a particular period of time, that is what is known as aggregate planning, right? Before going to aggregate planning, let us just create the platform for it. I think then it should be more clear to you. See, any business will strive to fulfill always the demand for its product and services of the customers during a specific period of time. Naturally, a business is always striving to strike a balance, that whatever the customer has demanded, whatever type of products or services customer has demanded, we are there to supply those products and services in that stipulated period of time. So, to achieve this goal, what happens is it allocates various resources, like we know the inputs, right? It may be man, machines, materials, money. What it does, it allocates it, means it distributes it in proper sense. We all know that these resources are scarce. Naturally, for any organization, anything cannot be in abundant because it has a cost in it, right? Cost factor is involved. So these resources are scarce. Moreover, there is certain cost for each one of them. Nothing is available in free. And what is important again is that these resources can have the alternative use also. Say suppose if you are hiring 20% for your manufacturing unit, then these 20% can have the alternate usage also in some other unit, and if they are paid high, they may shift their end. There may be a backlog of these 20% in the organization itself. That is why this is just an example. That is why all these inputs, if you are not using it here, they may be used out somewhere else. Because they are scarce and because there is alternative use of each one of them, they have to be used properly. They have to be taken for the manufacturing purpose in a justified way, so that we can meet the demand that is created on the customer's part, right? So the success of any business largely depends on the fact that there is a balance between aggregate supply and aggregate demand for the product or services. That means whatever the demand is created or is supposed to be created, or say suppose it is hopeful that this much demand will be rising in this much period of time, then at that time we must have enough supply so that we can balance that, and only then the successful business can be run, or there can be a proper running of the successful business. When that happens, only when we can strike a balance between the aggregate supply that we have and whatever the demand that is about to rise in a near future, right? So what is the plan, or what is the purpose of AP? AP is such an approach. AP always will be in this unit as aggregate planning, right? Is that approach that balances the productive capacity of the organization with the expected demand. See, if in a near future, if demand is going to rise, and with the forecast you come to know that demand may rise to say from 200 units to almost 350 units in the next 6 to 18 months to come. Now, if this demand is going to rise from 200 to 350 units, and what you have existing capacity tells you that yes, if we go with the 200 units, the existing capacity can exactly match with 200 units. But there is expectation that there is going to be a rise of 150 units more in the near 6 to 18 months that is to come. That means the demand may rise up to this level. Then what will be the immediate thought in the manufacturer's mind? That we should adjust our supply, we should adjust our manufacturing in such a way that we can meet this rising demand of 150 units in the near future. So what he will do, what the logical answer would be, that he will try to manage with the existing capacity. See, for these fluctuation or for these short term demand, he'll not invest more in the fixed assets, rather he'll try to manipulate his current assets. Current assets are what? Maybe the materials, maybe the labor hours, right? He'll try to manipulate this, he'll try to adjust this, and he'll try to meet this 150 units increase in the demand. This is what, when we do this, this is what is said to be aggregate planning. Simply this example exactly suits the basic understanding of aggregate planning, right? Thus there is a need to build such condition through which the long term strategies and short term results can be gained. Let's see, all the time if the demand rises, right, things are fine enough, they seem to be positive, and what we try to do is we'll try to manage with the existing capacity. We will not bring in too much of investment, we will not try to put in so much of investment, because it may be a thought that in a long run this demand may not be persistent, or this may not be continuous. Then it will be in the long run, or maybe say after 16 months 18 months there may be a fall in the demand, and then what about the idle machines or idle installments that we have done, installations that we have done? Then at that time that may be incurring the overheads, and that is why a manufacturer always tries to balance first with the existing capacity and the increasing demand. He tries to create a balance. That is what is known as aggregate planning, right? Or we can even say aggregate management, because at that time he'll try to put in all the inputs, whatever the existing capacity is, he'll try to balance with the rising demand that is expected too. And that is what is known as, this situation is known as aggregate planning. Thus, planning for such different time period is termed as aggregate planning. It is an approach to take up with the planning for the intermediate time period. This is a planning for the period of 6 to 18 months. It deals with the developing different ways to use the facilities and resources at different levels so as to meet the demand. That means whatever the developing ways may be, whatever the different ways may be of using the existing facilities or resources at the different levels, so that we can meet the demand of that is supposed to rise somewhere after 6 to 18 months. That pre-planning that we do related to this time period, intermediate time period of 6 to 18 months, neither it is too short, neither it is too long, right? And that is why this planning period is known as the intermediate time period, and it is more or less concerned with aggregate planning. Thus, aggregate planning is important to an organization which wants to optimize, means maximize its operational activity, because it helps in balancing short-term production plans and long-term strategic plans. Strategic plans, we all know that they are long-term planning, right? That means whatever we want to take up, say after 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, then that is a part of strategic planning, and it is taken up at the top level management. These you have learned somewhere in the fundamentals of management. When we want to meet these strategic plans, it cannot be just a jump to strategic plan. Through aggregate planning of the short term period or intermediate period of 6 to 18 months, we can gradually take our operational activities in such a way that we can balance whatever facilities we have with the increasing or decreasing demand that is about to rise somewhere in next 6 to 18 months. This is what is known as the aggregate planning. Again, aggregate planning indicates that plans are developed for product lines and or product families rather than individual product. Very, very important is this. Aggregate planning is not concerned with the single kind of product. There is a good example quoted in your text also, and here also we can mention it, that suppose there is a company who is manufacturing refrigerators. Okay, we are trying to understand how AP is related with aggregate. That means how it is related to product families and not a single product. Suppose now if this manufacturer is manufacturing say different types of refrigerators. Refrigerators may be of different size, it may be of different model, it may be of different design, color and facilities. We all know this, right? Now when it is say in the next 1 year or 1.5 year, he may find out that there may be a change in the demand of refrigerators. That means there may be a rise in the demand of refrigerator, and he needs to produce more number of refrigerators. Then whatever the basic requirement to produce these refrigerators, he tries to manage. That means irrespective of the size, કઈ સાઇઝનું પ્રોડ્યુસ કરવાનું છે, કયો મોડલ છે, કઈ સાઇઝ, કયા વસ્તુ અથવા કઈ ડિઝાઇન વધારે ડિમાન્ડમાં હશે, that is not considered. Instead, what is considered, what will be the number of demanded items, aggregate number of demanded items. There may be say 1 2 3 4 size, right? Say 650 ml, it may be say of say 25 liters, it may be of 50 liters, for example, it may be of various kind of sizes. Then that is not considered right here while aggregate planning, but what number of refrigerators may be demanded during the 6 to 18 months, that is calculated, and accordingly the aggregate planning is done. That means it is not done for single product, it is done for the whole product line, or it may be done for the product family together, right? That is why it is known as aggregate planning. The same example has been taken up there. That means here in AP, the resource capacity is calculated in aggregate terms, like how many labor hours may be required, how many machines hours will be required, and how many materials and whatever the requirement may be, how we are going to get it without any classification or specification. That means one model may require some basic requirements, and is that available with us or not to meet the increasing demand. If not, then we can make changes in the say materials. We can make, I told you, current assets can be manipulated, right? If we need to have more number of man hours, that can be done. We need if more number of machine hours to meet the demand, that can be done. That means in wholesome whatever number of refrigerators that we have to produce, that aggregate demand is being taken up, and to meet that demand, whatever the requirements are, is that capacity available with the unit or not, that is being calculated. And this is what is known as aggregate planning, and it is done without any classification and specification. What size, which color, that is not taken. The whole family of refrigerators, whatsoever size, whatsoever model, whatsoever design it may be, aggregately what number of refrigerators are demanded or will be demanded somewhere in near future, depending upon that the capacity is being adjusted. It begins with the forecast, as I told you, of aggregate demand for the product over intermediate time span of 6 to 18 months. Then a general plan is made to meet the demand by deciding the output, maybe the manpower requirement, inventory, etc. Right? Once we try to forecast that within the next 6 to 18 months, what will be the number of demanded refrigerators would be. That's a forecast, right? You are predicting in future. Depending on that forecast, we are trying to adjust our capacity. We are trying to meet our own requirement that may be related to, say, whatever the outputs decided are. Depending on that, whatever the materials we require, the basic manpower, how much it would be required, whatever the inventories we require, we try to plan out, we try to balance that, and that is because it is for a short period of 6 to 18 months. It is known as the aggregate planning related to this intermediate period. Thus, increasing this is very important slide, pay attention to this. Thus, increasing the new capacity may not be possible in this period. We know that increasing new capacity, buying, if we come to know that 150 units are required more, 200 units are produced already on a regular basis by a manufacturing unit. Now, if 150 units are demanded more or are supposed to be are expected to demanded more, then in that case we are not going to buy the machines producing 150 units more. What we will do is we will try to manipulate, we will try to adjust with the existing capacity. right? And that is what is said to be the aggregate planning. Thus, increasing the new capacity may not be possible in this time, but manpower requirement can be adjusted, inventory level can be changed to meet the expected demand. It reflects the decision on various aspects. What is AP all about? It tells us about the various aspects and decision related to it, like whatever the output rate may be, whatever employment we may require, whatever the changes in the inventory levels that are required. If we are outsourcing, we are subcontracting with some other firms, then what type of requirement would be there. Again, the back orders, that means the orders that can't be filled at current time, but we may have to get it beforehand, then such kind of orders are also taken into consideration, and then the AP is done, right? So when we are taking up with AP, when a company is doing with aggregate planning, it takes up all these various aspects in mind, and then it plans out for 6 to 18 months. Thus, if a unit wish to take AP, it requires appropriate information. Supposingly, if mine is a unit and I want to take up with say aggregate planning for next 6 to 18 months, right, related to my product, then what type of information? How am I going to start? It starts with whatever available resources are, whatever I have right now, what is my existing capacity. Next information that I need is what is expected demand forecast. That means within this 6 to 18 months, whatever the expected demand may be, it may be rise or it may be fall in demand. I have to consider that forecast, I have to keep it in mind. And the third information that I'll be needing is policies regarding the changes required. That means if the demand is supposed to rise or demand is expected to rise, that means for each and every input that I may be using to produce my product, I need a change in it, and there may be a different policy related to all the types of materials, money, manpower, machine hours, whatever we are using. All of them have a kind of policies in it, and there may be changes required for these policies. So 3 things I need to have appropriate information about before having my aggregate planning done. Number 1, whatever the available resources are. Number 2, on the other side, whatever the expected demand is, and how the policies regarding all the types of inputs may need a change, right? If these many things I have, then further I can take up with aggregate planning. Thus, then if I am taking up with this aggregate planning, I have taken up suppose with all the types of required information, then what at the end would I get, right? After aggregate planning, what will be my output? The output will be, I'll be able to find out my cost, I'll be able to plan out my cost at the end, and there may be a projected level of inventory. I'll come to know that lump sum I may require these many things, these many types of employment may be required, this much of subcontracting is required, this much of inventory is required, this much of back ordering may be required. Means I can predict it, I can project it, and then I can go well with my planning, and that is what is aggregate planning all about. Thus, it's an arrangement in which the enterprise tries to strike a balance between the inputs and the future aggregate demand for the period of 6 to 18 months, mind you, as short term is arranged, and thus current assets can be changed and not the fixed assets, right? It is done to reduce the cost and meeting the increasing demand. Naturally, if any kind of aggregate planning we want to do, we want to just check out that we can meet, in the beginning of the lecture I told you, we can meet the demand of the customers, that is the prime purpose, and whatever the existing things we have, not increasing the cost of investment, but rather we are trying to reduce the cost by using the existing capacity, and how well we can do, that is what is all about aggregate planning. Where strategic planning is a long-term planning, this is what also I have told you earlier, that where strategic planning, it is done for a long period of time. AP is what? It is a part of the strategic planning which is done for the intermediate period of 6 to 18 months. Means in a part we take up with the demand, expected demand, we try to meet with the existing capacity, again we plan out. Once the output is received, or once that those 18 months are clear and we come to know whatever results we have received, we can plan out for the next 6 to 18 months, and likewise. So we can come to know about this short term demand expectation or demand rise, and we can match it with our existing capacity. When you strike a balance between this is known as aggregate planning. I think the concept of aggregate planning should be quite clear to you right now. Right, we move on. That means the introduction part is over, and here we are moving towards the definition area. The aggregate planning is done in advance of 6 to 18 months. Whatever we have learnt up till now in the previous slides, everything is here in a nutshell form. That means it is in here in the form of definitions, various definitions given by different people or maybe anonymous persons. So we need to understand this. Whatever the definitions that are given in the form of inverted commas, we cannot manipulate the words there, we cannot change the words, so be careful while using these definitions. The aggregate planning is done in advance of 6 to 18 months, we know this, and it includes a combination of subcontracting, sourcing, outsourcing, employment, labor overtime, amount of inventory, and planned output to match the demand and supply cost effectively. We have seen earlier, so that whatever we are planning, we can match with the demand, and whatever we have with us or whatever the changes that are required, that can be done in the cost effective manner. Next, aggregate planning is a critical one to an organization which wants to optimize, means which wants to maximize the operational activity, means whatever operations it takes up, because it helps in balancing short-term production plans and long-term strategic planning or plans, right? Aggregate planning again is the process of determining, means deciding output level of the product grouped over the next 16 to 6 to 18 months period, or on a weekly or on a monthly basis. That means for a short period of time when we want to plan anything, it is always through aggregate planning we can have the best results. Again, aggregate planning is the process. What type of process? Of developing, analyzing, and maintaining a preliminary approximate schedule of the overall operation of an organization. That means you are developing, you are analyzing, and at the end you are maintaining what? The approximate schedule of the overall operations of an organization that is to come up in the next 6 to 18 months. Like this, what we have done in today's session is we have tried to understand what is aggregate planning all about, because in the next session onwards we'll be taking up with the different aspects like maybe the objectives, the importance of aggregate planning. So once the fundamental area is clear to you, we can relate the rest of the points in the next sessions accordingly. By the time we meet next, right, it's goodbye from my side, and we'll be meeting soon with the new aspects of aggregate planning as we have seen in the earlier slides. By the time we meet next, it's a thank you and goodbye. Take care of yourselves. Thanks.